Wow. All right. So I do want to keep this as conversational as possible. Just by quick introduction, I'm Tom Robbins. I work out of a dive shop in Bellevue called Silent World. I tend to teach photography, open water, kind of whatever. I've been an underwater photographer for, God, it's probably about 30 years, give or take, on and off. I started back in the old day with digital or with non-digital and then kind of moved up. I do a lot with the Adobe products. I tend to run these classes around Lightroom, around Premiere Pro for video, some Photoshop stuff, integration. I used a few other tools, but I'm not an expert. But certainly open to questions and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And we'll go ahead and kind of get started. So let's talk a little bit, and feel free to hop in if you have questions or anything like that. So Adobe Lightroom is part of the Adobe subscription services. There's a bunch of different subscriptions that you can get. I am going to be doing Lightroom Classic tonight, which, as you can see, I have a MacBook that I'm running it on. There also is a Lightroom mobile for iPads, and we'll also run on here. I'm not going to cover that tonight. I have had some folks ask to do like one of these sessions or a class around it. The big difference between kind of Lightroom Classic and Lightroom Mobile is that they're still trying to bring a lot of the features in. So Lightroom Classic that you see here has a lot of tons of features and unique things you can do. When you get an Adobe subscription, and there's different levels, I think the lowest end, and I think it's still the same, is what's called the photography package, where I think it's like $10 a month.
That is
and
right.
You get, is that right? Okay. And
you
get Lightroom and you get Photoshop, and that's actually kind of perfect for what a lot of people are looking to do. And then you can kind of go up from there and you can get additional products. Once you install Adobe and you get in, you'll see kind of at the top up here, that little circle thing. This is kind of how you control it. You can come in here, they push down regular updates. A lot of what Lightroom did, so when they moved it over to the subscription service, as someone who worked at Microsoft for a very long time in tech, everyone says, oh, when you do subscriptions, they're going to add in more features, and they never quite do. Adobe has done a fantastic job of that. They are adding features kind of all the time. So what's been very impressive is as they add these new features, they push them out. So it's not uncommon. Sometimes I'll update it and I'll look at it and I'm like, I don't know what that is. So you kind of have to do a little searching. So it's a downside and also a good side. But once you come in here, you can kind of control everything that's around, as well as Adobe does give you the ability to save stuff up to the cloud, depending on your subscription level, which is kind of nice. Talking about kind of workflow, what some people will do is they'll pull stuff off their camera. They'll do a quick overview with the Adobe mobile app, like on an iPad, save it up to the cloud, and then come in and do kind of more detailed work on the classic version that you see here. So just so you know, kind of once you install it, where you start. When you talk about Lightroom, I want to spend a few minutes kind of talking about the difference between kind of Lightroom and Photoshop. The power of Lightroom is that it's offering non-destructive editing. So really what that means is if I go into Photoshop and I edit something, I'm making a change permanent, right? If I save that into that file is permanent. What Lightroom does is it leaves your initial image the same, and then you just add additional things on top of it. So it's completely non-destructive, which really makes for some kind of interesting things that you can do. So for example, here's just a picture, not one of my better ones, but a picture, and you'll notice that I just imported this so you can kind of see the history that's here. So if I go back up, I don't know, let's pick one of these. And I go into develop, and I'll talk more about this. You can see every change that's ever been made to this file. So really what it does is it starts and it rolls back. So this allows me at any point to see exactly what happened. And I can also kind of scroll through here and see how each of the changes got made. And it might be a little hard to see over this, but you'll see kind of it started out a little bright. I added a vignette, which closed it up, and you can kind of see the changes. I can also go in and roll back any changes if I want to go completely back. The other side is everything is stored on your local system. So what this means is this is the original file. I shoot in RAW, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but I shoot in RAW. My Olympus camera, I have a 3/4 mirrorless, which is my primary. When I import this and I bring it in, it stores it in folders. And really the power of Lightroom is that this file is always out here. It's never going to change it. And then it's just going to continue to add on top of it. So it's that non-destructive nature and that organization, I think, that makes Lightroom very powerful. From a Photoshop perspective, obviously, when you're in Photoshop and you're editing things and you're making changes, you have to have a different workflow, right? Because you're making changes to stuff, so you need to save it and you need to version it out. So that's one of the huge powers that you can see. As a complete side note, when you have Lightroom on your machine, you are going to want to back it up. So it will actually back itself up, and it takes the catalog which it creates. So there's actually a database that sits underneath this called LRCat that it creates. And that database basically has a file pointer that says this picture is stored in this directory. This is the history that was added on top of it. And you want to back that up, because if you lose that, then obviously you have a problem. So a bunch of tools. So for example, I use a product called Carbonite that just always runs and backs stuff up. However, you do want to keep an eye on that, because if you lose that catalog, that becomes, it's obviously pretty crippling, because everything is gone on top of that. So let me stop that. Let me stop there and see if anyone has kind of any initial questions or anything. Yes.
When you say back it up, do you mean like external hard drive, or what do you mean exactly?
Is exactly that. You should back it up to an external hard drive.
Okay.
So I've got, I don't know how many pictures on here. I've got a catalog, the LRCat file. You want to back it completely up. So the Carbonite app that I have, let's see, basically runs, and it runs, we'll see if it'll come up here. And it basically runs in the background, and it backs everything up. So as I put new images on, it'll back it up. It'll back up the catalog. I also do have an external hard drive that I'll take and I'll put everything on as well. So I have another backup. But yeah, it is very file based, meaning if you lose those, you've got a big problem. So I always want to make sure people understand that you need to have that backup in place. Does that help?
Yeah. Tom, just to add, if I remember right, LRCat only backs up the catalog. You still need to back up your pictures separately from the catalog.
That's correct. That's correct. So the LRCat file, which is their kind of database file, basically has pointers to it. And it has pointers that say, this file is in this directory. So to your point, if you move files around, which you never want to do outside of Lightroom, you can also screw your catalog up. So a lot of times what people will do is they'll go in and they'll say, oh yeah, let me go in my Finder, or they'll look around and they'll start renaming stuff, or they'll start moving it into different folders. And you're going to come in and you'll find that the catalog is messed up, and you'll get a message here, unable to find file. You can fix that by right-clicking on it and pointing to it. But to your point, you do want to back up your pictures as well as your catalog. And like I said, and I'm not recommending Carbonite, it's the one I use. There's a bunch of third-party SaaS products that you should be running. And there's kind of no excuse these days if we have a lot of money invested in camera equipment that you can't back up your PC with something that runs in the background. So, yeah.
One quick,
of course.
So the files back up on Carbonite, but then the external hard drive just backs up your photographs. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
No, my workflow is everything is backed up into Carbonite. So this backs up my entire hard drive. Every so often, I have an external hard drive that'll back up my catalog as well as my pictures.
Okay.
Just so that it makes me feel better because I have that on my hard drive.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Sarah, if
Now,
it makes sense for me, I do slightly differently because I use Windows and I don't have Carbonite. But I have a separate hard disk just for my images. All my images and LRCAT goes into that hard disk.
Okay.
Right. So if I carry that hard disk around with me, even if I use a different computer, I can still back things up into that catalog.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. No, and that's valid. And there's a bunch of different ways of doing it, but the big thing here is make sure you're backing stuff up.
Great.
Now, the good news is I think this is the third or fourth PC, Mac. I haven't used Windows for a while that I've had. And even Windows, my wife's, when she went to a new Windows, it moves over fairly easily. So every time we got a new PC, the actual utility that came with it that moved it. I reinstalled Lightroom and I had no problem. So it just came right up. So that's actually good. But please, like I said, make sure you back everything up. Okay, let me stop there. Any other questions, comments? Any questions? Okay.
I have a question. What is Carbonite? Sorry, I came in late and I'm a newbie in all of this.
Oh, no, that's fine. So Carbonite is basically a SaaS software package that allows you to back up your PC. I don't even know where I got it from, but I ran across it. I think I pay, I don't even remember, but it's not much. And it's just an application that I run on my PC. It always runs in the back. Prior to this, I had imported a bunch of different things, and you can see like it took out the LRCAT, and it's backing up a bunch of pictures. These are all pictures that I started putting in, and all it does is run in the background, and it just backs up my PC.
What's the difference between that and iCloud? Sorry.
Oh, so iCloud will back it up, but for me, it only backs up certain files. It doesn't back up everything. And I've got a large amount of photos that just won't fit on iCloud for me. So I don't back those up to iCloud.
Got it.
Yeah. And it depends. So I'm not recommending Carbonite. I like it, but the idea is just make sure you have something, whether it's iCloud, a hard drive or something. Because as I've taught this enough, people come back and they're like, my hard drive went, what do I do? And it's like, okay, you should have a backup. So I like to spend time on that.
Thank you.
No, that's no problem. Feel free to, if you have any questions. So let's talk about Lightroom and kind of the workflow. And this is really the biggest thing when you start using these kinds of products is you have to think of what we call the workflow. And the workflow is, once I take pictures, how do I get them in? How do I process them? And then once they're in, how can I find them? And that's generating a workflow. So I just imported this a little while ago. I have an SD card. I open up Lightroom. I go in and I go to library, just so that you know how to do it. And then I hit import, and then import will find my SD card and it'll import it in. And then when it's done, it ejects it. What it's really doing is it's copying it in, and it's asking me, where do I want to put it on my folder? I store everything usually by date. So some people, there's different strategies, and that's kind of a whole conversation unto itself. I tend to store it by date. So my library is made up of a bunch of different imports here. So this is the previous import that I just did. When you look on our library, you can see keywords. I'll talk more about those in a minute. And then collections and a bunch of other stuff. But really, when you're importing it, you're really starting to look at, you know, what do I want to keep? My recommendation is when you're editing photos, I tend to get rid of ones that I don't think will clean up well. If either they're out of focus or I just don't like them, I tend to delete them. I know some people feel very strongly about keeping all of their photos. I don't. And I usually recommend people to get rid of them. As you do this more, your photos will get better. And, you know, if you have a lot of disk space, go for it. But generally, you know, think about ones that you want to keep and get rid of. Once
I was in the keep everything boat until I realized I ran out of space on my computer. So now I'm going through and purging.
Yep.
Can I ask a really quick question? So I am fairly new to, well, I'm not very good at underwater photography. So, but I've been told, you know, just take videos then and then clip them out. But, and so will you kind of speak to that too? Cause I've been wanting to just be more traditional and just take actual pictures. But they don't turn all that well. And so, yeah, like I have videos and I've kind of kept everything because, but I'm not, I guess that does this too, where you put a video in and it can kind of splice out. Will you kind of speak to that at some point?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. So Lightroom itself doesn't actually really support video. That's what Premiere Pro was.
Okay.
It will, and I imported into this. I don't know if I can find it.
So do you want people to take more stills then and really work on getting their still shots rather than doing the video? And
I tend to do both. I'll do video and then I'll do stills. I tend to do a lot more stills. With video, I use Adobe Premiere Pro, and I've been starting to play a little bit more with that, you know, and play a little bit on building out, you know, more documentary kind of stuff. But I know a lot of people who shoot on GoPro, and then the GoPro app itself will allow you to do screen grabs.
Yeah.
And that's certainly okay, and you end up with JPEG files. So the big thing to keep in mind is there's two basic modes to shoot, right? There's what we call JPEG, which is you know, more of the compressed image, and then there's RAW. So RAW, and what I have here is basically I shoot RAW. So RAW typically has an ORF extension for Olympus, and Nikon I think is a little bit different. But what happens is when you click the shutter, RAW takes everything on, brings everything in, and gives you a lot more pixels to work with. JPEG basically takes it and, you know, compresses it down. The big difference, you know, for example, is some of these images here can be 5 to 10, you know, 5 to 10 megs, very large. You know, JPEG can be a lot less. The downside is that JPEG, you really can't edit it that much, because once you start editing it, you get more artifacts and there's lossless and a bunch of other. I always recommend, if you're shooting stills, shoot RAW if you're using Lightroom. And we certainly, someone had asked me, and I was going to look at putting together a class like this on like Premiere Pro to look at some of the video stuff as well. But yeah, for Lightroom, it's just not a video tool, and they designed it not to be that way.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I just find, like, I've been practicing taking lots and lots of stills.
Yeah.
Because that's what I was doing, videos and then screen chapters. But yeah, I take lots of stills, and usually 1 or 2 of them will work out, and then that just makes me get better. And then I've also just been practicing on lining up my shots. Actually, Tom ran a pretty decent class that helped with that as well, so that was really fun. I don't know if you've done it again since Dennis and I took it.
No, we're looking at doing it again over the summer. So
is this the class on Lightroom or something else?
No, this was on buoyancy for photographers. So we did
Got
buoyancy for photographers, and then we've also done some shooting classes as well.
Got it. Okay.
Tanya, we did a boat rental at one point and had some fun. But the big thing about digital is you get yourself a nice card, you have a nice picture, you can shoot it. And it's funny, so I'll go on an hour dive and I'll shoot, I don't know, 40 to 50 pictures, you know, give or take, whatever. And maybe 5 will show up and the rest I get rid of. You know, I mean, back in the old days where I only had 36 shots, I was lucky if I got one that turned out, you know, on print film. But there's nothing wrong, just keep shooting. And then there's just ways to get better. So
I really appreciate that advice from both of you, because you know, I've been told, oh, just take videos, but I want to take stills, and that's kind of been my experience. I have a couple that are like, they're amazing, and so many that aren't. But yeah, no, so this was worth it just for that little piece of advice, because I want to keep taking stills and getting better.
Yeah.
Class. So thanks.
Sir, I went between both of that mode. I used to take pictures. My pictures suck big time. So I thought I'll take videos and crop pictures out of it. But I turned out the pictures you get out of video are very poor quality.
Okay.
And things you want in focus are not necessarily in focus in the video. The still is a much higher resolution than what you get out of the video.
Great. Okay.
Then I switched back to now taking stills, because if I want to capture a moment, a still is better than a video.
Love it.
I still shoot videos because I want to capture the motion. But a lot of times, if I want to capture a moment, it's a still.
Great.
Yep. No, that's
so happy to hear all of you say that.
That's fine. All right. So we were talking about workflow. So when you import things, they actually, as you can see, you have what's called a grid or a loop view. Basically, a grid is what you're seeing here. And if I select a picture, I can do things like, you know, look at them differently. I can make it full screen. There's just different things that I can do within this. And you'll also notice as I select things, I get a navigator on my left. Library is where you're going to spend your time when you're looking for stuff, you're trying to organize stuff, or you're sorting stuff. So just to kind of lay it out for you, right? We've got our navigator, we've got our catalog here, all your photographs. Synced photographs are basically things I've synced up to the cloud. So kind of up here on the right, you can see I've got a lot of stuff that I'm syncing, and I'm starting to work with that a little bit more, trying to see how I can use that workflow from my camera to my phone up to here. All synced photographs. So what's synced up there? Any sync errors, collections I'll talk about in a minute, and typically previous import. So what I have a tendency to do is my workflow is when I import something in, it goes into previous import. I spend my time going through here, and I'll do things like, oh, I think I can get that one to work. If I can't get it to work, I basically hit X on here, which sets it to rejected. So what this does is it allows me to work through my grid and then being able to figure out what things I'm going to get rid of. So if I don't like these, I'll just spend my time and I'll click it and I'll say, I don't like that one. I don't like that one. And then when I'm ready, I can do photo, delete rejected, or get rid of selected photos. And what this will do is it'll take the ones I selected, and I have a couple of choices here, right? I can remove from Lightroom. The issue I have with that is that it leaves it on your hard drive. So you have like these files out here that I never remember. So I'm a big fan, and I usually tell people delete from disk. So what that means is you get rid of it. And as Tanya said, you can run out of space, and I often see that happening for people. So if you don't want to remove it, and I do recommend learning the keyboard shortcuts, and there's some shortcut guides that are out there. So if I hit X, it's set as rejected. If I hit U, it removes the label. So it'll remove the flag. So that X that you see in the upper left-hand corner. The other thing that we'll talk about is as you're, let me move stuff around here. As you're looking around on your right-hand side, you'll also see the histogram, which I'll get into a little bit more. Basically, the left, things that are on the left tend to be too light. Things that are on the right tend to be too dark. And there's ways of handling that. The other big thing, and this is one of the huge powers of Lightroom, is keywording. So keywording basically allows you to find and look at what you're going to go ahead and use for your picture. So I use keywords like scuba diving, Alki Cove 2, which is, you know, something here, Bandito charters, you know, Canada, cloud sponge. You can have any number of keywords for things. So what this means is if I want to find, you know, something that was about, you know, cloud sponges, I can click it here. If oh yeah, I went on a trip to Canada and I remember, you know, British Columbia, I can go kind of look there and start to look and start to pull these together. Keywording is super important to remember to do as you're editing, because everyone forgets about it once they're done editing. Did you have a question? I saw you.
Yeah, thanks. So do you actually change the name of your photograph from the file name to a name then, or where do you use the keywords?
So the keywording is used right here. So you go to the picture, you do the keyword here, and I'll put in, I don't know, crab or something, right? So this will go ahead and update the actual Lightroom catalog for us. I never touch the name of the file. I never really have to worry about the file. This is all the stuff that Lightroom's doing for me.
Oh, okay.
So it's super powerful, right? So usually as I'm looking through, when I bring everything in, I tend to bring in with scuba or scuba diving, the location of where I was, as well as any other interesting facts. If I knew, you know, I was at Sun Rock on the Hood Canal, I'll do like Hood Canal, Sun Rock. If I was looking for just wolf eels, I'll put wolf eels. But the keywording allows me to control my catalog because, as you can see, I've got like 7,000 pictures in here, right? Finding them.
Tom, can you keyword a whole group of photos to, like, you know, when you
Yep, you can. So when you import them, the import window comes up and you can put the keyword in right then, or you can select them and then update it here. It's pretty flexible on that. And then you've got your keyword list is here, and you can see I've got, you know, a lot here. The other, and I think we were talking about this earlier, so there's a bunch of metadata that's actually stored on your files. And you can kind of see that here, right? So the metadata, so this is the file name. And I never adjust this. This is what's out on the hard drive. This is the folder it's in. You can go and you can update metadata here. Oops, sorry. If we do this, we can also look at, you know, things like captions. There's also some GPS information that can be stored in here. So if your phone tracks GPS, some of that you can do. Location, my camera does not do that, but it'll actually give you the sublocation. And one of the nice things about Lightroom is that if it has the GPS location, there's some cool things you can do on like maps and some of the others if you're interested in that. So this is the actual metadata that's on the file. I never ever have to edit the file. I'm just editing everything within Lightroom. So on the left,
quick question. It seems like you have both the location and the subject in your tags.
Correct. Yep.
Right. Is that so every time you edit the picture, I'm guessing you will update the subject in the metadata or in the tag as you go along.
Correct.
Is that part of your workflow?
It is. It is.
Okay.
So I'll import them. I'll go through and I'll keep or get rid of. I'll do my, you know, remove or reject. I'll have the location. And then as I start doing kind of my next round of editing, I'll start updating keywords like,
Got it.
yeah, if I looked at this picture, it looks okay. However, until I get in and I start developing it and I decide whether I want to keep it, once I know that, I might put this under like C stars or something along that.
Got it.
So, all right. So the other thing, if we look on the left-hand side here, is you can see kind of folders. So this is actually mirroring what's out in your folder system. So if for some reason you wanted to move a folder from point A, you know, from 2021 to, I don't know, another folder, if you drag it here, it'll automatically handle it on the file system. The biggest mistake people make.
That again? I missed that somehow.
Yeah, so if you go into the folder structure here, this maps what's actually out on your folder system.
Okay.
So if you want to move a file, so for example, I'll give you a great example. So I went on a trip to Mexico. I was gone for, I don't know, a week or 10 days, and I shot God knows how many pictures. And I basically had them in one folder, right, when I imported them in, because when I'm on the trip and when I'm done, I wanted to move them all to the 2022 folder. So I had a folder set up that I imported everything into, and then I basically just dragged it from here. This is the same thing I would do out in the folder system, but Lightroom will manage all of that for me. Like I said, the biggest mistake people make is that they try to edit stuff out in the folder system. And Lightroom gets very, very angry about that. So don't do that. Okay, so the other is collections. Collections are a great way of organizing your pictures. So collections allow me to do things like, I want to keep track of nudibranchs because I'm very interested in them. I usually do a calendar every year. And this allows me to select all of my calendar pictures, right? So these are the ones that I like. You know, I did a nudibranch calendar last year, so I kind of store everything in there. You know, I do a lot of, you know, obviously octopus are just very cool, so I'll save stuff in here. So this allows me to build collections, and realistically, collections are a great way of going kind of across all of your files and folders. You create a collection, and then anytime you want to add something to it, you basically drag it from your film strip down here into the collection. So what'll happen is I do my workflow, I'll go ahead and I'll say, well, I'm going to keep this picture, keep that picture. And then I'll update the keyword, right? So it'll be, you know, I don't know, ratfish or Alki Cove 2 or whatever that is. But then it's like, you know, that's a really good picture of an octopus, and I'll put it over in the octopus. Or I'll, you know, that's a really nice picture of a crab. I was fascinated by crabs for a while, so I have like pictures of crabs that I was keeping. You know, wolf eels, because I've been doing some work with wolf eels. This allows me to pull apart, and regardless of where it is, I can pull it in. Let me stop there. Do you have a question?
Will it stay in its original and it'll copy there, or it actually removes from the, like the if you've got it under like the date like 2021, will it stay there and also move, or?
No, it'll stay. So it's in a
Okay.
file folder.
Great.
It's never going to move.
Just copies over.
Yeah, it has keywords. It actually just creates a pointer to it.
Oh.
So the catalog itself. So what you'll notice is one of the big things I think Lightroom does really well at is the performance, right? So if you think about starting with pictures and all the things that's happening, so they store a lot of pointers to different areas. So a collection doesn't create a version of the picture, it just points to that.
Oh, great.
So this is all part of it. So collections are also good. So as you get more into this, there's some other areas about like photo books and slideshow and then printing. You can take a collection and create a photo book You know, if you have a collection and you go into book, it'll automatically create it. So collections become a way for you to dynamically create collections of images and then do other things with them. So for example, every year I print a catalog or a calendar. So I'll create that. I know people create books, you know, I've done that too. So I'll create a collection of octopus, then I'll go in and create a photo book around it. So there's a lot of other features. Collections are a super nice way of doing that. So also underneath here is your film strip. So the film strip itself is going to show everything you have selected. So if you go up to your catalog and you say all photographs, you'll see that it's showing me all 7,000 photographs back to when my son was like 2 and he's now 19. So it's got all those photographs. You can also create other catalogs as well, but typically I tend to work like in a previous import. So this is where I import them. I'll go through and I'll edit, and I'll always know the last ones that I pulled in are on the previous import. And that's what's showing up down here. So this allows me to look through the film strip to kind of see what I want. So other things to think about, and this is gets into, I mean, the amount of ways that you can store and organize image in Lightroom is just kind of ridiculous in some ways. They also have things that you can filter as well as stars. And I don't use colors down here. I know some people do. You can get a very complicated sorting mechanism. So you could have stars, up to 5 stars, and colors. You can also create, you know, 3 flags. I mean, it's a good way. I tend to use stars. So anything 3 stars and higher is usually what I tend to keep. I get rid of everything when it's below that. Kind of 5 stars are my favorite. This import has nothing in it. So if I go up to all photographs and I do things like 5 stars, these are kind of over the years, all the pictures that I think are my best pictures, right? That are easy for me to find out. And I'll go through here every so often and I'm like, ooh, that sucks. And I'll make it, you know, 3 stars, or I'll get rid of it or whatever. But there's so many different ways and your workflow. Personally, I found stars works for me, and collections, as well as keywords. If you really want to go crazy, you can add in colors, you can add in filters. I mean, there's just a bunch of stuff that you can do, and there's whole theories on kind of what you're going to do there. So let me stop there, kind of as just a quick overview of the library tab, and see if anyone has any questions on that before we kind of dive a little bit deeper.
Maybe one silly question, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
Given how critical we end up being of our own photographs, what makes you add something to 5 stars?
No, it's funny. So over the years, I've gotten more critical, and if I think it's 5 stars, I look at it and I go, wow, that's really good. Then I keep it. If I look at it, 3 stars is like, I don't really like it, and I'm probably going to get rid of it. And then if it's not 5 stars, it's 4 stars. So that's how I do it in my workflow. I know some people are better. To me, it's all in the eye of the beholder. So
okay.
Yeah, I tend to, I'll give you a great example. So this one I have is 5 star down here, just because I think it's a good picture. I love the rockfish. You know, I love the fact that he looks like he's giving me the side eye, you know, kind of thing. And that's just my personal opinion. Some people may not like it, so it's kind of up to you.
Got it.
That's the biggest benefit, I think, of Lightroom, is the idea that I can make my choices and, you know, it's mine. And if I don't like it, like I said, I'll go back through 5 stars every so often and I'll go, oh my God, I must have had too much wine when I gave that a 5 star, you know, and I move it down to a 3 star. So you can constantly adjust accordingly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, perfect.
Does Lightroom work across like your devices? Because I'm on my laptop now, but I've got an iMac as well. Does it, or do you have to get it for each device?
I believe you license it, and I'd have to check, but I
Oh no,
believe
you're
you
fine. I can
license
look
it.
it up.
Yeah, I think you license it for one device, but
Okay, that's kind
you
of
can check.
Tom, it's other way around. You
Other
license
way?
it for one user. You can
Okay.
use it on as many devices, because I have it on
Cool.
my laptop, I have it on my desktop. It uses the same license.
great.
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you.
So there we go. That's something I learned as well. So, okay, perfect. All right. So let's hop into develop. So as I look through kind of a previous import, and I'm like, okay, I'm keeping these pictures, I'm not keeping these. When I select an image, I go down, and this is kind of the next level of editing that I do. This is really where I'm going to go ahead and do color correction. I'm going to decide, how I want to make it, what I want to do with it. So there's a bunch of opportunities that Lightroom provides, and you'll see those kind of on the right hand side. First is obviously the histogram, so you can see kind of how the picture looks, and you'll see as we start editing these that we want to get it more towards the middle. Then as you look down, there's a bunch of different controls that are here, right? So the eyedropper allows me to control white balance, and I can set tone and a bunch of other stuff. Up here is where the kind of the tools are. So let's actually play with like this picture a little bit. So when I look at this, it's like, okay, it's kind of dark, but I kind of like that. The white balance is a little off because these anemones tend not to photograph real well. My strobes make them a little shiny. So I'll pick the dropper up and I can adjust the white balance a little bit. And you'll notice as I do that, let me go ahead and reset. So at any point, I can reset what I did. So as I make changes, you can reset, or if I want to go into history, I can set back to a certain point. So I'll update the white balance a little bit, and you can see it took away some of the hue that's there. What I always recommend for people who start is there's a lot of controls here, and you can spend a lot of time going through like exposure and contrast. I recommend typically start with auto. What auto will do is auto will go through and it tries to adjust it the best it can. In this one, it didn't do so great, but it then allows me to go ahead and do things like maybe I'm going to move the exposure down to clear it up. I'm going to probably take the contrast and maybe move it up a little bit, take the clarity and I'll move the clarity up a little bit. And you'll start to see that I'm getting a nice kind of, round here where it's starting to look dark on the edges. You'll notice a couple of things too. It's important to understand that what you're seeing is black, and I think you guys should be able to see kind of this shiny is really absence of color. So Lightroom has this idea of there's black and then there's kind of an absence of color, which isn't really black according to them. So you start to see that. And then I can do different things. So I can dehaze it a little bit, so which actually will add a little bit of red, which also kind of starts to clear up a lot of the area around it. So you'll notice kind of on my left-hand side, it's starting to look a little bit better. It's not perfect. If I hit F, it'll take me to full screen, and then I can hit escape. So that's actually a nice editing trick to be able to look at it and say, okay, this is what it looks like. You're going to spend a lot of time as you're getting to know with these controls. Like I said, I always recommend starting with auto and then you can adjust it. So for example, if I turn the whites all the way down, clearly I don't like that. If I turn it up too much, it's too bright. If I go ahead and I click whites, it'll take it back down. And at any point, I can either go back to auto or I can start adjusting it, which actually gives me a very nice way of controlling what's there. Couple of tools that I want to spend some time on. You'll see up here, and these are new. They put these in, I think it's been about a year, where they started banding a lot of these menus together. And these 4 is where you're going to spend a lot of time. The first one is edit and cropping. So what this will allow me to do is if I want to crop my picture down, I can. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind, right? So originally, this is keeping the aspect ratio. I can also change that if I don't want to by clicking the lock, which gives me, so you'll notice now when I do this, I have to kind of keep it together. If I start clicking the lock, I can do things like I want to make an off-size edit, or I want to do an off-size cut, as you're seeing here, or crop. We also have the ability of doing angle. And this so much isn't something that we use a lot for underwater photography. But for example, if you wanted to straighten this up, if you found something that was straight, you could put this, down next to it, and you'll notice that it adjusts the angle. So this is great, if you're doing a lot of topside photography, and if you ever take a picture of, like a sunset, and you'll notice that the water isn't even, right? If you're looking out over the beach, you can use this to straighten it out. So occasionally you'll have to use this, but the nice part about underwater photography is that we don't necessarily have, as straight a line, but you can pull that in if you want to. Next is what's called the healing or clone brush. So a lot of what you're going to start to do is you'll get backscatter. So this one is an example of something that had backscatter. So when I took it with my 2 strobes, I remember I shot this actually at Sun Rock this weekend. There was a lot of crap in the water. I thought I had my strobes out, but clearly I caught a bunch of stuff, and that's what's there. What this allows me to do is I can heal things. So if I want to get rid of specific areas, so I can zoom in, and you'll notice that I have a round brush that's here, and you can adjust this brush to be as big as you want. And what this will do is when I select it, it'll go ahead and sample another area because I have it set to heal. So what it'll do is it'll sample another area, and it'll say, oh, okay, so this is what it should be. And hopefully it'll go ahead and get rid of the spots that are there. So you'll notice in this picture, as I'm clicking each one of these, the spots start to go away, okay? Which is kind of nice. And you will spend time if you have like a dive I did this weekend at Sun Rock, which I think Tanya was there as well. Visibility was, Tanya, about 5 feet. So we spent a lot of time, trying to adjust things as much as we can. So you can kind of use this to go around and then get rid of kind of different issues or images or, things that you want to get rid of. You'll notice, by the way, and I didn't specifically say this, but you could do fit up here. And then also you can do fill. So kind of how much you want to take over. And then you can also zoom in. So I just have a tendency to sit here as I go through and start to clean up some of the stuff like you can see me do here.
Tom?
So, yeah.
With the clone brush, how does it know where to pull from? Are you like clicking next to it and then dragging over? Is that what you're doing? Or how does it know?
No. So the AI, the artificial intelligence within Lightroom, is pretty smart.
Oh.
So what it will do, here, let me show you. What it will do is it's going to take it and it's going to sample the image and it's going to say, I think it should come from here.
Brilliant. Okay.
If you don't like this, you can move it and put it in a different area. Now, the problem you have is that this is going to be too dark.
Yeah.
So I'm going to end up with a big spot.
So if you wanted to make a big spot, like you want to make a polka dot, that's what you would do. You just kind of drag it and pop it and it would do that?
You could. Yeah, you could. Usually we use this to get rid of kind of things that I don't want. So there's like black spots on that and that kind of thing. But so for example, when you hit auto and the rest, a lot of the artificial intelligence that they built into Lightroom is pretty good. It's not perfect. And I'll show you some areas where, especially as underwater photographers, we have trouble. But it's pretty good, and it allows me to go in. If you have a lot of issues with this, sometimes you can go into Photoshop, and Photoshop is a little bit better on the cloning and healing brushes, but you can do a pretty good job in Lightroom without ever having to worry about Photoshop. So, okay. So we have that. Let's next talk about red eye. So red eye is really designed for when we're taking pictures of our dogs or our family or something like that, and we get flash in the eye. We get red eye. It works very well for that. It does not work so well with red eye in fish. If you shoot wolf eels, you can get, flash burn on the eye. It really isn't designed for that. There's better ways of getting around it. You can try it on red eye for fish and underwater creatures, but it tends not to work that well. So I don't really mess with red eye all that much, to be honest with you. Next is a huge value that Lightroom added in. It had been available in Photoshop for a while, but this is called masking. And they've recently redone this around a couple of different things. So let's start with the simple one. So they allow you to add a new mask, and you can select the subject or you can select the sky. So as you can guess, we don't have a sky. So this one works, but you have to try it out a little bit on underwater. So for example, if I say select subject, you see this did pretty good, right? It's selected, the pole with the starfish and the anemone, right? So with this subject, I can now go ahead and do things like, if I want to adjust the exposure up a little bit on that, which I did, maybe I want to change the clarity and move the clarity up a little bit. I want to make the whites a little bit stronger. Maybe I'll dehaze it. That's probably about right. But basically, subject will attempt to find the subject. It tends to work okay for underwater, but sometimes it doesn't. And there's things that we can do to fix that, which I'll show you in a minute. The other is selecting sky, right? All right, let's go ahead let's select another one here. So if we go ahead and we select sky, you'll see it's detecting, it didn't do so well on the sky, right? I mean, I wanted to try to use it to select everything but the subject, and that didn't work so well. So there's kind of two ways that we can get around this. One is we can go ahead and say things like select subtract, and I can select a brush, and then I can take the brush and I can brush over what I want to subtract out, right? So that's actually kind of one way. And you'll find, I mean, it's literally painting. And there are, if you have a mouse, it works fine. I'm not actually using a mouse, I'm just using my trackpad. I also have a light board that works well as well. But you'll find that you'll end up just doing some brushing, and then you'll be able to get out what's there. The other is, let's go ahead and select another one here. If I go ahead and I say select subject, and you see that it's select subject, I can do an invert. Basically, invert says, I have the subject selected, I want to do everything but the subject. So basically what this allows me to do is select everything else that's left. So a lot of what I found with the masking, especially on underwater photos, is if you can lock onto the subject and you can invert, you can get everything else, which actually tends to work pretty nice. So what this means is now that I've got the background set up, If I wanted to kind of set the exposure down, maybe set the blacks down. So you'll see I had an image that had like a lot of different issues to it. And then in about 2 clicks, you can see that I basically got rid of a lot of the backscatter that was there. So it actually worked out fairly well. So let me go done here, and then I can do an F. And you can see, I mean, it still obviously needs to be cleaned up some, but this allows me to select a lot of that out. So the other thing to kind of think about, especially as you're using, because a lot of what you want to do is you want to do masking. So you want to select portions, you want to highlight portions. We also have the ability of doing a brush, and a brush becomes very powerful if I'm looking at selecting kind of large swaths of things that are around here. So, I can select this whole thing and I can brush it, and then I can change, different attributes around it. I can also go ahead and do things like, a linear gradient, which will allow me to put a gradient across. So if you're trying to show light, so for example, if I wanted to, maybe highlight and make sure, because I shot it wrong and I didn't have the light coming in from a certain way, I can go ahead and do things like up the exposure. I can also change shadows on specific areas. There's a lot of things that I can do kind of within that. Let me stop there, because that is a huge, valuable portion, and a lot of the time that you spend, and we'll go through and look at some more, is really working on kind of these brushing and these masking techniques, because that's usually will allow you to, excuse me, find things and be able to enhance things out within your photo. So let me stop there and see, does anyone have any questions so far?
Maybe a meta question, Tom, yet another meta question. How long do you spend on each picture typically? Because it seems like I spend way more time in Lightroom than actually taking the picture.
Yes, I spend a lot of time in Lightroom. I mean, I have some pictures that I've literally spent, I don't want to say 30 hours on, over a while. I will spend a lot of time trying to make the picture look exactly as I want, but I think that's half the fun. But yeah, I spend a lot of time with my pictures.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. My wife is sitting across from me and she's shaking her head. She's like, yes. So, okay, perfect. All right. Any other questions so far? All right. Let's actually we can play a little bit more with some pictures that are here. So this is kind of a roll of pictures. I haven't really looked at them all that well, but as I said, if I come in and I start looking at it, I will do things like I'll auto, which will help clean it up. And then I'll do things like I can up the clarity. I can I'll dehaze it a little bit. As you can see. And then I'm not a huge fan of this picture. However, if I wanted to kind of try to clean it up a little bit, I could do a select the subject, and you'll see that it didn't do such a hot job, right? It selected the crab, it didn't select the claw, it didn't select the line. So I could go ahead and add a brush, and I can do things like, and I'll just do this quick. I'm usually a little bit more careful, but I'll go in and I'll start to, clean this up. Here we go. And as you see, I can kind of pull this up. And then when I'm done here, and my subject, and I would hopefully do this a lot better, is I would then go ahead and I would invert. And then once I invert, I have everything selected but the crab. and hopefully my line. And then I can do things like I can start to get rid of, you know, a lot of the distortion that's there. So while this isn't perfect, or even close to perfect, you can see that I've started to get rid of some of the backscatter. And then if I really like this picture, I would start to spend more time on it. And I would do things like go in here and then maybe start to get rid of, you know, the spots that are here. You can also do things like create a new mask and set a brush, and you can make the brush bigger. And so you'll see that I'm using my fingers on my mouse pad to make it larger. I can also do the size. And then there's things like feather, flow, and density. And if you think about kind of a brush, feathering, I think, kind of goes on the outside. The flow is like, where does it go? How far out? And then the density, like the hardness of the brush. So, you know, as I wanted to make this bigger, okay, you know, I could start clearing that up, or I could do things like turn the exposure down, and then maybe turn the blacks down a little bit to get rid of some of that. So as you can see, and it's certainly by no means perfect, it starts to get in and look a little bit better. So if we do F here, you'll see that it starts to clear up some of these. So let me stop there. And questions so far? It's a little overwhelming, so there's a lot of stuff here, so sorry about that. Well, not sorry, but certainly it's a lot of good information and things that you can do. Okay, good. All right, so when we talk about pictures, and sorry, Zoom is, there we go. Get Zoom out of the way here. When we go into things like the library, and we can start to go look at all photos. Wanted to show you kind of some of the, you know, you could spend quite a bit of time on photos. Let's go down here. So for example, this photo, and we go over here, we go to library, we go back to develop, and you can see, right, there's quite a bit of work that started. So this one, let's go back here. This one, when I imported it, you know, you can start to see kind of how it changed until I got it to kind of where I wanted it. So, and that's just spending the time to kind of clean it up a little bit. So, good. Okay. So, a lot of what you'll do initially, and where I always recommend, is spending time in the develop tab and then working kind of through the different areas here. Start with your white balance, and then usually start with the auto, and then obviously you can start playing with a little bit of these and see. You should never be afraid to turn these all the way up or turn these all the way down. So you want to see exactly what's going on. Okay. All right, good. Just a couple of other things that are there, and we're not going to get too much into these. So if you have some of the geographic, it'll start to map out kind of where your photos were from and where you've taken them, which is kind of cool because you can start to see, you know, where people are. And there we go on the map. As I said, there's a built-in photo book here. And the photo book is actually quite powerful. They recently updated it to use, you know, pretty much what they call free-form templates. So you can basically put pictures, put text, kind of do whatever's here. You have a couple of ways of outputting. One is that you can use some third-party services they have, or you know, you can output to PDF, and then, you know, take it up to Amazon, and then Amazon, you can print it off of Amazon if you want as well, because Amazon will allow you to lay out a book if you want to put it on like the Kindle, on the Kindle Creator, and then put it out. So if you want to do that, it certainly supports it. Slideshow is kind of cool. It just allows you to create a slideshow. You can tie in, you know, music, you can tie in templates, and you can output it as a movie. So it'll actually create a little MP4 file, an MP4, a movie file. And it'll support kind of 1080 if you want to go up that high. So it's a nice way of taking collections and then making collections and then creating kind of a video file off of it. And then last is obviously things like print, as well as being able to output stuff on the web. So there's a lot of power and possibilities that you can do within Lightroom really before, you know, you get up to Photoshop or kind of anything that high end. So let me stop there and see if anyone has any questions. And I was just going to do a quick overview of export, and then I think that was what I was going to cover tonight. Any questions? All right. So you've got yourself a really nice picture, and you want to export it. Once you select export, there's a couple of things that you can do here. One is you can export to hard drive. You can export actually directly out to email. So sometimes if I want to share something via email, I can export it right here, or to a CD, DVD. I don't actually have one of those anymore on here, but you can. I tend to do out on the hard drive. And there's a couple of things that you can do here, right? One is you can have it named, the file, if you want. You can also set file settings. Everything tends to do JPEG these days, and you can have sizes. If you're going to print, you're going to tend to want to let the size be what it is, and then make the resolution usually about 100 pixels per inch. That makes it pretty good if you're going to do prints or something like that. If you're looking to just share it, you know, via via email or whatever, you can do that. The biggest question I usually get is, I'm going to, you know, put it into a photo contest, and a photo contest usually has very specific sizing. You can come in here and you can do things like resize to fit, you know, width and height, dimensions, long edge, short edge. A lot of times for photo contests, they'll say, well, the long edge has to be this big, or, you know, width and height has to be this big. So you can go ahead and resize to fit. As well as you can do some watermarking here. So always recommend, if you're going to post up to Facebook, or if you're going to do, you know, Instagram, I usually put I have a short URL that I use on there, because I've had some issues with my picture showing up elsewhere and someone saying, look at this great picture I shot. And it's like, you can do reverse lookup and that kind of stuff, but just a short watermark will solve that problem. All right, let me stop there. Everyone looks a little burnt out. Other questions or comments or things like that?
This is great. I just need to play with it, is really, you know, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Can you talk about the watermarking a little bit? Do you like actually have a URL that shows it, or can you just like put your like name, initials?
Yeah, you can do either. I have my own, I have my website, robinsunderwater.com, and I tend to put that on there. I know people who just put their name and that kind of stuff. So when you go,
and then does that watermark go someplace specific? Does it usually go down at the bottom?
You can pick where you want it to go. I tend to put it down on the side. Hang on, let me find. I have a picture.
How do you say? Yeah, I see that. See, it's right there. How do you set that up?
Here. So here's what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
God, there's like Zoom is popping up. Okay, like that. So you go into Lightroom, and then the easiest way to do it is hit export, and then go down to copyright. Oh, they just changed this. Oh wait, no, sorry, watermarking. No, they didn't. Here, and then you could
Oh, no, you
do,
edit. Okay.
yeah, you could do simple copyright watermark. I think they built that, or you could hit edit watermarks
Oh,
and you can put whatever you want in there. So I have mine, you know, my Robin's Underwater, and I call it URL short. And you'll notice over here, you have a bunch of text options, shadow, opaque. I mean, you could go pretty crazy.
Okay.
And you can, you know, if you want to go crazy, you can, you know, I know people who put it in script and do a bunch of other stuff. So
Yeah.
it's pretty straightforward. I'm not a fan of, I know some people like put it right over the image. I just put it on the corner because I want you to see the picture. But I want to be able to make sure that I have some control over the ownership. So,
and does that just go out with those images that you're actually exporting? Otherwise, everything stays without the watermark. But as it leaves your computer, or you know, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so you can, you know, especially if I'm printing stuff, meaning I'm going to send it off to the printers or whatever.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You just uncheck the watermark.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, I tend to, if I'll post up to, I don't know, Instagram or Facebook or, you know, whatever, I'll put the watermark on. So, and people have different feelings about watermarks, and that's certainly okay. So good. All right. Good. Other questions, thoughts?
Very helpful.
Good.
This is
Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Would you be interested in maybe doing some more advanced classes around this? I can put together something.
Yes.
I feel like I'm almost to the point where I can do the advanced class. It's taken a while for me to sink in. Up until recently, I was just at the auto and then stop, but now I'm playing a little.
It just takes time, and you have to be willing to sit down and play with it.
Yeah. And I over processed a couple of images, which is why I like the go back. Okay, it was right here then.
I do that. You get to it and you're like, oh my God, that's horrible. What did I do?
Oh,
and then you can just back up. Yeah.
On that, so let's say you've got like 20 different corrections, but you like the number 15 correction. Do you just kind of go back there and then maybe kind of click on it, and then that's the one that sits as you're looking through your library?
Yeah. Well, you can roll back to that point and get
Okay.
rid of 16 through 20 or 16 through 50.
You can get rid of them once. Okay, that's okay. Great.
Yeah. Or you can, make that the last. So you
gotcha.
can. It'll keep track of that pretty heavily. Good.
Oh.
Is anyone here using Photoshop at all, or you
I
guys
downloaded it as
with
part of my
Lightroom
package.
enough.
Okay, no, that's fair. I mean, one of the things that we do is we start to talk a little bit about Lightroom and Photoshop, and then Premiere Pro and some of the other stuff. So yeah, those are all things we can certainly look at setting up and doing a little bit more. And as always, if you're interested, come out and dive with us if you're in the area. We at Silent World, we do shop dives every 2 weeks. I try to tie those to the photo safaris that we do, and we're going to start to do a little bit more of the online photo reviews that we come to. I haven't had a chance to do much of those over the last couple of months, but it'll give us an opportunity. I know Tanya's enjoyed a few of those. We share images and we sit around and basically drink wine and talk for an hour and look at images and talk about photography and diving. So
Hey
it's
Tom,
all
when's
good.
the next photo safari dive?
It is going to be, I didn't do one for May 15th because I can't be there. I believe it's going to be January 1st, if I'm not mistaken. Or sorry, not January 1st, June 1st. Yeah.
Are those on your on the Silent World website, or how do you find them?
So yeah, just for the shop dives, go to meetup, and then look for Silent World.
Okay.
Silent World Dive Group. And then you can just join that. What you'll do is you'll apply it. Basically, you fill out like 2 questions, and then myself or someone at the shop will let you in really quick. And you can, and you can join. The next dive is this weekend, May 15th at Redondo. If you're in the area, we're going to dive Redondo. Tanya, you're not coming in, right?
It's an afternoon dive, so that makes it hard for me on Sunday.
No, that's fair. Yeah,
If it was a Saturday
tides-
afternoon dive, I could totally do it, but if it was a Saturday
tides-
afternoon dive, I could totally do it, but Sunday afternoon's kind of hard.
No, that's fine. The tides are starting to get a little bit weird. So Saturday or Sunday, we're meeting at 4 and diving at 5. So, and I haven't looked in June. June will be, we're going to do June. The first dive of the month is Edmonds. And then after that, I think we'll do something over on the Hood Canal. So I haven't set that up yet, but you guys are welcome to join. Just let us know. And we always love having people come out. And if you have questions, give the shop a call or obviously reach out to me and we're happy to help.
I also dive just a lot, period. So I'm always looking for dive buddies.
Yep.
Oh, that's great. I'm trying to dive up more around here. So that's perfect. The best way to reach you, Tom, is it like if we do have questions, is it through like just the meetup app or or email, or what do you prefer?
Oh yeah, no, you can hang on one second. Let me